Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It's December 31st, 2023. I can tell that some people were a bit chagrined that I criticized Joe Louis and Tyson Fury in the video I made yesterday. Right? Let's talk about Joe Louis a little bit more. We'll even mention Tyson Fury. Right? I want people to think this through. I also want people to go to my favorites folder right now and look at the videos I've posted. One is of the infamous December 1947 fight between Joe Louis and Arnold Crean, who called himself Jersey Joe Walcott. Right? Walcott, of course, later would go on to win the heavyweight title, only to lose it to Rocky Marciano. After knocking Marciano down in the fight, Marciano would later call Jersey Joe Walcott the best fighter he faced. Right? Also, in my favorites folder is the 1951 knockout of the year. It's Jersey Joe Walcott landing a left hook to the jaw of the great Ezzard Charles, a light heavyweight who killed a man in a fight, was afraid of his own punching power, and decided he was then going to continue on in boxing in the heavyweight division. He's the guy who takes Joe Louis's heavyweight title. Let's talk about all of it again, but remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, my dad loved Joe Louis. I was raised around older black men who loved Joe Louis. My dad was bald like I am now, but yet he loved to go to the barbershop with his son, me, to talk with the barber, who was an older black man, and to talk to guys who were literally just hanging out at the barbershop. Right? This was in Queens, New York City. Right? The barbershop was on Colfax, where I was raised. I consider to be the black belt of New York. It's a vibrant black area that people just don't know enough about. Right? LL Cool J posed by Andrew Jackson High School, which was the local high school where I lived. Right? People like Mark Jackson are from St. Albans, Queens. I was from Cambria Heights, Queens. Run DMC is from Hollis, Queens. Salt and Pepper, right next door to Cambria Heights, Queens. We're from Laurelton. Right? For the record, Bernie Madoff, also from Laurelton. Right? So there's a part of Queens, New York City that is heavily minority, that's heavily into sports, right? In the early 1970s, when I was a kid who barely knew how to turn on the TV, the black men around me, at a time when Ali was trying to get back into boxing, the black men around me were all talking about Joe Louis. He was the gold standard, right? People loved Ali. This was the era of afros. People loved Ali. The question was whether Ali was ever going to develop into a Joe Louis, right? Louis was king. But I need for people here in 2023 to think about a few things. Right now, my dad listened to Joe Louis fights in the 30s and 40s. You heard the verb I used. He listened to Joe Louis fights. Folks, back then, this generation, the one I'm talking about, older black men when I was a little boy, they listened to fights. They didn't actually see fights. There was an episode of Columbo from the mid-1970s. You may have seen it. The murder victim is a videographer who actually used a VCR. You may know about the Bob Crane murder in the later 70s, where his good buddy, I believe the buddy's name was Carpenter, had a newfangled device called a VCR, and the two guys would watch the VCR together. Right? Well, understand, people didn't have VCRs. Working class folks did not have VCRs in the 1970s. Right? These fights rarely came on TV. I'm telling you, when I was a kid, I first became aware of the Joe Louis-Rocky Marciano fight because when it came on TV, my dad said, "Rich, change the channel." Right? This was before remote controls. I was the channel changer in the house. I was the youngest. I'd get up out of my seat and I'd go change the channel. My dad did not want to see Rocky Marciano against Joe Louis. And understand, folks, these historical fights, that generation themselves did not see many of them. Mike Tyson in the 80s, and he's still alive, the boxing press can talk to him, had a manager, Jim Jacobs, with Bill Clayton. And understand, they had historical fight films. Tyson would sit down with them and watch these films. Jacobs had to pay a lot of money to get the rights to the films. These films weren't even shown on TV. Now they're online. So in my favorites folder right now, you're going to see the 1947 fight between Jersey Joe Walcott and Joe Louis, where Jersey Joe knocks Joe Louis down twice. Knocks him down twice. Dominates the fight, only to lose to Louis by decision. Louis was interesting. My favorite boxer in history is Jack Johnson. Understand, when Joe Louis comes along, they tell Joe, no white women, no standing over fallen white opponents, no bragging in public. You can't be loud, you can't be boisterous, no jewelry. Right now, we know privately that Louis is a revolutionary, that Louis has a convicted felon in his corner, that Louis pulls strings to help an AWOL Sugar Ray Robinson get back into the sport of boxing. When I say AWOL, I mean from the U.S. military. We understand that Louis is a guy who is friends with Frank Sinatra, hangs out with bookmakers later in life, helped Sonny Liston get a place in Las Vegas. Now that's the real Louis. Understand, the social Louis is playing a game. Right? He's the respected black man in the 1940s. It's amazing as you look at the 47 fight between himself and Jersey Joe Walcott. It is amazing to think that that's the year that Jackie Robinson integrates baseball. Right? Understand how fallacious that era is. Right? Black men, the black athlete's not supposed to be good enough to play Major League Baseball, but yet you're having heavyweight championship matches between black athletes. Right? The black athlete, Willie Mays famously tried out for the Boston Red Sox, did not make the team. Ends up hitting 660 home runs, arguably is the best ball player in history when you factor in his fielding. Right? Well, just understand, in that world, Joe Louis is king as you look at the video. This is looking past reputation formed in part by people like my dad, love my dad to death, who listened to Louis fights, didn't see many of them. You can see them now. So when you see the Walcott fight, you notice the foot speed gap, and it's profound. When you see the Walcott fight, you notice Joe Louis does not have ring coverage. You notice Joe Louis doesn't move as well as George Foreman. You notice Joe Louis does not have Foreman's jab. You notice Joe Louis is front foot, doesn't really have a developed back foot, like a Tyson Fury. You notice Joe Louis himself isn't mobile, so he doesn't have Fury's mobile jab. He has great defense. Lord knows he has power. There's no question about that. He KOs Jersey Joe Walcott in the rematch. But understand, legacies are determined by inches. Louis, who did everything right, who understood boxing protocol about being in the ring when the winner is announced, at the end of this fight knew he lost the fight to the point where he's leaving the ring and had to be talked by his corner into staying in the ring for the decision. Right, so folks, just understand, a lot of folklore in boxing stems from the fact that people in the early years couldn't watch the films. Right? There's a scene in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, an Amazon Prime fictional depiction of the era, where people are gathered around a radio, including the actor Sterling Brown, listening to a Floyd Patterson heavyweight fight. Folks, Patterson is mid to late 50s. Right? This Joe Louis, Jersey Joe Walcott, is 47. Let me just say, had Walcott, who Marciano in an interview said was the best he had faced, right? Let's remember, Walcott drops Marciano. Walcott doesn't lose the belt until the later rounds of their first fight. Let's remember, Walcott knocks out Ezzard Charles, who beats Joe Louis and takes Joe Louis's title. Had Walcott been awarded the decision, a decision I believe he earned in this December 1947 fight over Joe Louis, we'd be talking about Jersey Joe Walcott as one of the greats. Right, so give it a look. When I talk about Louis lacking foot speed, all I ask is that people actually look up the tapes of some of his fights. You heard me here talk about how there are questions about Tyson Fury's jaw. Folks, Louis gets knocked down twice by Jersey Joe Walcott. Let's remember, he gets stopped by Max Smelling. Let's remember, he gets knocked out the ring by Rocky Marciano. Right? Food for thought. Give it a look. I don't mean to be a heretic here. I'm just trying to get the right macro. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you look at the films I've put in my favorites folder here on YouTube. Give me your thoughts in the comment section of this YouTube video. Right? With slow foot speed, one wonders what would happen. One wonders what Joe Louis would do differently than Vladimir Klitschko tried to do against Tyson Fury. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.